A certain college student needed a small 2-hour course to fill out his schedule. The only one that fit was wildlife zoology. He had some reservations as he heard the course was tough and the teacher a bit different. But as it was the only choice, he signed up. After 1 week and 1 chapter, the professor passed out a test for the class. It was a sheet of paper divided into squares, and each square was a carefully drawn picture of some bird legs. Not bodies, not feet, just different birds' legs. The test simply asked them to identify the birds from the pictures of their legs. Well, the student was absolutely floored. He didn't have a clue. He sat and stared at the test and got madder and madder. Finally, reaching the boiling point, he stomped up to the front of the classroom and threw the test on the teacher's desk and exclaimed, "This is the worst test I have ever seen, and this is the dumbest course I have ever taken." The teacher looked up at him and said, "Young man, you just flunked the test." Then the teacher picked up the paper, saw that the student hadn't even put his name on the paper, and said, "By the way, young man, what's your name?" At this, the student bent over, pulled up his pant legs, revealed his legs, and said, "You identify me." And Paul finds himself in a situation here in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, where he expected to take a test. But we find here where he's the one who eventually tells the Corinthian church that they need to take a test. I don't think he was showing them his legs, but I think you get the idea here. He tells them that they need to take a test. I don't know exactly how you are about taking tests. I'm actually not very good at it. I'm one of these that panics when it's time to take a test. I've always had that problem. I'm one of these that as soon as the test is put in front of me, I seem to forget everything. Anything like that? Regardless of how much I studied, and I am definitely not one of those that can cram for a test. Not a good idea. Because as soon as I do that, I sit down and it's gone. Ever like that? Horrible test taker. But Paul is explaining to the Corinthian church that it's not a good idea to test ones who do not need to be tested. And as we take a look at chapter 13 of 2 Corinthians, Paul is facing those who do not need to question his motives. Verse 1 of chapter 13, he says, "This is the third time I am coming to you. Every fact must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. I gave a warning when I was present the second time, and now I give a warning while I am absent. To those who sinned before and to all the rest, if I come again, I will not be lenient, since you seek proof of Christ speaking in me. He is not weak toward you, but powerful among you. In fact, he was crucified in weakness, but he lives by God's power. For we also are weak in him, yet toward you we will live with him by God's power." Let's stop there for just a second. We kind of get an idea that Paul has already been to Corinth 2 other times. The first time around, he spent time at Corinth as he just went through and spent some time finding Christians or sharing with the Christians. The second time he went around, he began to establish or help establish the church. Now he has the warning that he is going to go and deal with some problems with the Corinthian church. And quite frankly, the Corinthian church is going to be an issue. As a matter of fact, we see that the Corinthian church is very similar to many of the Corinthian church, or the many of the Christian churches, rather, that we deal with here in the United States today. Can you believe a church, especially a new church, in a town like Corinth where there's a lot of issues, can you believe that they have problems? A Christian church that has problems? Wow. I can't imagine a Christian church having any problems, do you? Yeah. Every perfect church has imperfections. Because besides Earl, we're all imperfect. But the fact is that the Corinthian church had quite a few issues that Paul has been trying to tell them in two chapters or 2 books, and that, hey, you need to deal with these issues. And he goes on and tells them now in this second book, in the 13th chapter, he says, listen, you've got to deal with this issue. You've got some problems you've got to focus on, and he's going to have to deal with them later on. There were reports getting back to him of this conflict of interest. This conflict of interest. And Paul is saying that this message that's getting back to him is not gossip. People aren't gossiping to him about some issues. And the reason we say that is, look at this in this first verse. He says, every fact must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. This is an excerpt that is spoken about in 3 places in the books of the law, or in Moses' writings. 3 specific times, if you wanted to go back and look at these later. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, Deuteronomy 17, verse 6, Numbers chapter 35, verse 30. It's 3 times where it talks about that you need to have 2 or 3 witnesses to back up the message, to the information that's being talked about. If it is information that is being talked about that these witnesses are saying is going on either in the camp that's talking about here in the Old Testament, or in this church that's talking about in Corinth, then we need to back this up and we need to find out the facts. And apparently this is fact of the problems that are going on in the church of Corinth. And Paul's saying, I've heard this, I'm backing it up, I've heard the message, and apparently this is a major problem that's going on in this church in Corinth. It says it's not gossip, I know what's going on, you can't deny it, and so we're going to have to address the problem. And here's the problems. The problems that they're facing are causing doubt in Paul's earlier messages. So there's false teachers that are coming into the church, deceptive members of the church, and unsuspecting power mongers. Unsuspecting power mongers. I think that's very important. People coming into the church with alternative purpose of the church. People who are looking for power, or looking for people to say, hey, they have more intention than anything else. They want the attention, or they want to look like they have something that they want people to look at them. And they understand what's best. The problem with that is not godly. Matter of fact, Paul talks about this some as well, over and over again. The Bible talks about it back in Acts chapter 20, verse 29. Run over there for just a second. Acts chapter 20, verse 29. Keep your finger, if you can, over in 2 Corinthians 13, but run over to Acts chapter 20, verse 29. Paul himself says, look out for this. Matter of fact, he calls them wolves. Acts chapter 20, verse 29. He says, I know that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Okay, go back to 2 Corinthians 13. Paul is saying, listen, there are going to be those just like this that are going to come into the church. They're going to act like, they got it all figured out. They're going to look good. But instead, they're going to be they're going to be like wolves. They're going to tear the flock apart from the inside out. Or they're going to circle the flock and then destroy the flock from the outside in. So how is that? Because they're going to seize control of the flock. And Paul explained that he warned the new church to take care of the problematic people. Paul never went after the troublemakers himself. Do you notice that? Paul never said to the church, I want to come in and take care of the problem. He said to them, you need to take care of the problem first. You need to go and be the church. And that's interesting how he says that. Now, there are times where he went in and had to cut off the head of the wolves. But he said, you have the responsibility to be the church. And he said to them, you need to go in, take care of the problem that's causing all the grief within the church. I've told you over and over and over again what the problem is, and you're allowing the problem in the church. Take care of it. Wow. So Paul isn't the guy that needs to take care of the problem. He says, no. Paul says, the problem is in the church. You're allowing it. Fix the problem. So one man isn't supposed to take care of the problem? We kind of look at it sometimes in our culture today. We expect a denomination to fix the problem. We expect some expert to come in and fix the problem of the church. That was never a biblical thing. The biblical thing is when there's a problem that's causing difficulty in the church as a biblical family takes care of the issue that is causing the difficulty in the family. Paul goes on to say, explains that this message that Paul continues to give, should not be questioned. Because it is always about Christ. It's not about anything else. It's not about politics. It's not about what is important about the law. It is about Christ and Him crucified. That's the most important thing. Nothing else matters. And when that gets away from what's the central part of the heart of the church, then there's a problem. And it says, when that gets away from that, then the church, the whole heart of the church, falls apart. And Paul says the message is strong from Paul and the church. And if that is the key, then that is the key. And Paul goes on to say now in verse 5, instead of questioning our message, Paul says, you need to question yourself. You need to test yourself. So he says, quit testing us. Quit testing our message. You know our message is of Christ. You need to start testing your heart. You need to start testing yourself. Verse 5, test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves, or do you yourselves not recognize that Jesus Christ is in you, unless you fail the test. And And I hope you will recognize that we do not fail the test. Now we pray to God that you do nothing wrong. Not that we may appear to pass the test, but that you may do what is right, even though we may appear to fail. For we are not able to do anything against the truth, but only for the truth. In fact, we rejoice when we are weak and you are strong. We also pray that you become fully mature. This is why I am writing these things while absent, that when I am here, I will not use severity, in keeping with the authority of the Lord gave me for building up and not for tearing down. He says, test yourself to see if you are really of Christ. What does it mean to be of Christ? The concept of Christ is more than just a concept. It is a total change and to be completely sold out for Christ. Completely sold out for Christ. Of Christ means that one is not of anything else. It's either of Christ or not of Christ. See how that works? There's this or this. There's no in-between stuff. Either we're living for Christ or we're not. That's what the Bible tells us. And it's hard for us to really get that concept, because the world tells us we can kind of have that in between, that gray area. The Bible doesn't tell us to have a gray area. It says either live for Christ or not. It says test yourself. Test oneself means to compare one's actions, heart, and motives. But test it to what? Compare it to what? To somebody else? Compare it to what seems to be the best Christian? The model Christian? The Bible doesn't say to do that. There is no best Christian. There is no best model to live after, except Christ himself. The Bible says, compare yourselves to Christ. Test yourselves if you are living as Christ, right? There is no way to compare totally to Christ. But living like someone else doesn't matter. But instead, living as Christ or for Christ, the Bible says, Paul says, is gain. But living as the world or anyone else is loss. Paul explains that their focus should be to test themselves. The antagonists, those who are trying to cause all this problem and to say it's what Paul and his companions are saying is false. It says, test themselves, test the antagonists, and if they feel it really necessary, go ahead and test Paul's message. They're going to find out it was wrong and that they shouldn't have done that, but test it. But test themselves first. And they've already proven that, Paul has already proven that themselves to be sharing Christ and Him crucified alone. Matter of fact, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, move back to 1 Corinthians for just a moment. You're in 2 Corinthians now, move back to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. First Corinthians chapter 2, verse 1. It says this, when I came to you, brothers, announcing the testimony of God to you, I did not come with brilliance of speech or wisdom, for I didn't think it was a good idea to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling. My speech and my proclamation were not with persuasive words or wisdom, but with a powerful demonstration by the Spirit, so that your faith might not be based on men's wisdom, but on God's power. Paul's focus has been on the purpose of giving truth and nothing more. When we test ourselves, it should be based on nothing more than God's truth and on Christ and Him crucified. Go back to 2 Corinthians 13. He goes on to tell the church, if you get all that stuff out of there, get all those antagonists out of there, get all the problems out of there, as you're dealing with all those issues, you're dealing with those problematic people, get all that out of there, and if you do that, be at peace instead of letting others divide you. Verse 11, finally, brothers, rejoice. Become mature, be encouraged, be of the same mind, be at peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. And this is great. Verse 12, greet one another with a holy kiss. All the saints greet you. I like where it says that. You know, it kind of throws us off as Christians in our culture today, but let me kind of go with that for just a moment. The purpose of the antagonist in the church is to divide. Paul tells them to be at peace instead. To be at peace, to be at mature harmony, is to get rid of the problems. And it says, because they are to be restored in their harmony with one mind, show affection. For our culture today, it's like going up and giving a big hug. For some of us, big bear hug. We're in a culture, especially here in the West, in Nevada. Some of us, we're kind of like, okay, give me a good hearty handshake. It's good enough for me, that's fine. For some of you, yeah, give me a hug, Some of you want me to give you a hug. That's good. Hugs are good. But for in that culture that day, a holy kiss was a literal sign of acceptance. It was a brotherly, sisterly sign of acceptance. There was something of an intimacy between relationship, of showing I have a close relationship, a commonality with this individual as being a brother or sister in Christ. And I think the importance of bringing this out right here is saying, we don't need the junk in our family of God, our church. Saying instead, we need a commonality. We need to have an intimacy of a relationship, first with Christ, but a bond of love. I don't know how well it would go with our culture if we went around giving each other a kiss. How that kiss has worked out, I'm not sure how well that would go. But either way, that relationship, that big bear hug or whatever it is that you feel comfortable with, it is an intimacy saying as brothers and sisters in Christ, show that love. Have that relationship. That is the importance. To be one in heart and mind. I think our biggest problem in our relationship with Christ in our culture today as Christians is that we are not showing as believers, regardless of some disagreements, regardless of anything else, we are not showing that we are one in the bond of love. And that love, as that commonality of Christ, goes beyond those disagreements. And we're not getting back to Christ and Him crucified as the center of the church, the center of our commonality. Christ died once and for all people. He died so that we could have a relationship with each other that is eternal. And it was His sacrifice, His one sacrifice, that we could have that eternal life. Regardless of what else is going on in our life. It's that sacrifice that He made that we can love believers, each other here now, and those across the world, on the other side of the world and across the country. We are believers because we believe in the sacrifice of Christ. And we need to have that sacrificial love for each other. Because Christ is the head of the church. It's hard. But it should not be that hard, because Christ had the ultimate love for us and still has the ultimate love for us.